I personally think when you have a mixed team, it's the best. It shouldn't be more from this or that side. The best is a good 50-50 mix.
The gravity of the time is such that every new avenue of peace, no matter how dimly discernible, should be explored. Never before in history has so much hope for so many people been gathered together in a single organization. You will provide a great share of the wisdom, of the courage, and the faith which can bring to this world lasting peace for all nations and happiness and well-being for all men.
Gabriele Voigt, welcome to Titans of Nuclear.
It's my pleasure.
You are the president of Women in Nuclear, and I am very interested in how did your career start? Tell me everything. How did you get to the nuclear space?
This is a very, very long story because I started...
Let's go through it together.
In Germany, where I was studying biology, and I was specialized in genetics. And my PhD is actually on genetic engineering, which looked into fertilizing and nitrogen fixation. And what we did, we transferred genes which contained the nitrogenase gene into free living bacteria because we wanted to avoid the fertilizing. So my only issue I had with radioactivity was marking DNA in order to follow if the gene transfer was successful. And after my PhD, I wanted to return. This was in Bayreuth, north of Bavaria, where I completed my PhD work because I went with my boss there. Then I returned to Munich in order to write my thesis, and I immediately got a job, although I was not really that interested to have a job, in the then Ministry of Health, which related to biokinetics of radionuclides in animals. So my task was to search the literature on information to get biological half-lives, retention half-lives, distributions within the organs in animals in order to deduce data for humans. And so that was a complete literature work desk, I would say a desk worker. And this didn't make me very happy. It still does not, because I'm a really hands-on person. I only wanted to work in the laboratory, getting things done, cook in chemistry, and do experiments. So I started then to initiate own experiments, which means the transfer of cerium-144 to rats. And what we were looking for was if the transfer is higher in younger rats compared to adults, because that has a major impact on the dose conversion factors for infants. And so I have to confess, I killed some rats, and which I wouldn't do anymore. But in these days, I thought it's urgent and it's needed. And was very nice publication coming out on the absorption of cerium-144 in rats, independence of age. And we could demonstrate that there was 10 to the 3 higher uptake in the younger the age is, up to the newborn, because the gastrointestinal tract is not that developed as in adults. So this started my career in the animal area, because I got then a job in the then Research Center for Environment and Health, Institute of Radiation Protection. And actually, you know why I got the job? It was a pilot project to determine the transfer of radionuclides to cows' milk and meat. And because I'm born in the countryside, so I know how to milk a cow by hand. And I think this was really the trigger when my then boss said, okay, minimum she can milk the cow and probably also kill it. And this is why I got the job. And this started my career in radiation protection, where I developed over the many years. I was working for 15 years in that institute on transfer of radionuclides, not only in cow, but in other animals as well. And I have to say, all these animals, they were kept like pets, because I spent Christmas, New Year with my cow. She got caressed, and what she had to eat, just a tablet containing some radionuclides, and then I was taking urine, fecal samples, milk samples, and like a normal cow, after 8 months she was killed. So I had to go to a special facility because of the radioactivity, which was far below what we later had with Chernobyl contamination, and dissect the cow, which really was tough. I was a vegetarian for a year because she was so close to my heart. She was my pet. And but then we measured the transfer distribution in these different organs and the biological half-lives in these organs. So this started my career in radioecology, and then Chernobyl happened, and in the consequence of this, I became more and more involved in transfer of radionuclides in the environment at large. I did a lot of soil plant transfer studies, direct deposition, and I worked in the Chernobyl area, in the 30-kilometer zone, in the area of the Mayak, after the Mayak accident. We worked also in Semipalatinsk to look about the behavior of radionuclides after the explosions. So that was with my Russian colleague, with whom I'm still working nowadays in my private consultancy. And that started the whole career. I was involved then in many European Commission projects, and I was coordinating a lot of projects in relation to environmental transfer. And I always consider myself as an environmental radio protection person, because you can use radionuclides very nicely to follow and trace the transfer of different substances through the food chain, its behavior in the environment, how it is even dispersed in the air, because these are wonderful tracers which you can easily measure in comparison to other chemicals. So I was making my career in the Radiation Protection Institute until I was just to take over a new group, and I suddenly got a call from Vienna. Would you like to come and help the laboratories in Cyberstuff to develop a terrestrial environmental program? And I had nothing else to do. And actually, I was quarreling with my then boss a little bit about the pay, since I thought I should get a bit more, having more responsibility. And although I think he thought too, but he said he cannot defend it to the bosses, to the super bosses, and I was a bit mad. Which means I accepted that a short appointment for 3 months originally to somehow calm down, to get back. In this time, I wrote this program for the IAEA, for the laboratories, and I published so many papers because I had time. I had no administration and I was free, and that was actually a real great time. And then the position of the director of the agency's laboratories popped up, and so I got motivated to apply, and I thought, oh, it will never work, because the then DDG in the Nuclear Sciences and Applications department was German, Swiss German. And normally the agency would not appoint German, yeah. But somehow I convinced the DG, in that case, El Baradei, and I was hired, and I became the job as director. And I was there for 9 years in the Department of Nuclear Sciences and Applications. And that covered a wide area, because it came from practically applications in the safeguards area, measurement, environmental sampling, nuclear material measurements via food and agriculture, where I was actually also, that was actually my main expertise, remediation, to applications in the industry, and also in the health area. And since during my career, I was actually involved in all these areas, probably that was a kind of good fit, because, you know, you can't be expert everywhere, but I minimum knew something about it. And then you always have to rely on good people around you. So I was very lucky then. And I also established this environment radioecology program in the agency, which was kind of comparable to what they did in Monaco. Monaco, the laboratories there are on marine research, whereas the laboratories in Cybersdorf was on the terrestrial side. And with time, things changed. And we restructured. Actually, it was my initiative, and I'm proud to claim I think I'm the only director in the agency who has abolished her own position, because we then aligned the program responsibilities also with the laboratory responsibilities. And I took over the safeguards analytical services as director, and stayed there my last 5 years in this area. Built new laboratories, which was challenging, because Austria is a non-nuclear country, and of course has special requirements. And we were building a nuclear material laboratory there, since we are analyzing the samples from coming all over the world, which also contain plutonium and other uranium elements and isotopes. And so, but we succeeded. The laboratories are there. The nuclear material laboratory, a clean laboratory, a nice one. And that was my legacy to the agency. And then I left. And then, of course, I couldn't retire as such. With my friend, my Russian friend and colleague, we founded an own consultancy, Radiation Environment Management, where we are doing now little projects specifically in training of environmental modeling, preparing experiments which they can conduct in countries. So a lot of teaching, lecturing. And at the moment, we have concentrated on transfer of radionuclides in arid areas, which means very dry, hot. And that is quite interesting, because with climate change, the climate also of areas is changing to a more dry, arid climate. And that might have an influence on the transfer behavior of certain radionuclides. And this is why we are doing studies now in Kuwait, in United Arab Emirates. We have also a smaller project in Kazakhstan and are working with Russia. So keeps us still busy. And it's interesting, because I consider it now, sure, more a hobby rather than work to earn income. But it keeps you still going. And specifically, I'm also still an editor of journal Environmental Radioactivity. And the good thing is when you are an editor, you receive all the new research, and it keeps you really on top of the research of information. And I think this is really, as I said, for me, the job must be fun. It's like a hobby. And yeah, so I keep on going. And in parallel, I was, of course, always interested to support gender equality. That started long time ago, because when I started, I often was the only woman among a lot of men in that specific field. And also when I joined the agency, I think at the first time there was another director, female director, who left. And then I was, for a couple of years, I was the only female director in the IAEA. That has changed a lot, fortunately, now, and is even more improving with a new DG on board who is very strongly supporting women. And we actually, at the time, I was involved in a couple of internal committees also related to gender equality. So I was the joint appeals board chair, which also took the gender issue on its agenda, and I worked with the staff council on gender equality. And later on then we revitalized a kind of dormant women in nuclear chapter in the IAEA, which is now really boosting with a new young president. It's fantastic that young people are coming on board now. And I became the president of Women in Nuclear Global. So that's probably a short overview with many details and many funny stories and anecdotes in between.
Yes, it was very interesting to hear about all your career from the beginning, so that right now we can maybe decouple it a little bit and talk about interesting topics, some details of what you were doing. First question that came to my mind when I was listening to you was the fact that you were working on rats, you were working on cow, what the cow was eating, later the cow meat. How does it maybe translate to the research on humans? Can we somehow develop the transfer coefficients so that we apply this on our population?
Well, the studies I did on this transfer to cow, that was really to describe the transfer of a released radionuclide. And in most cases, you are looking at cesium-137, iodine-131, strontium-90 along the food chain, how it reaches the human, in which form you consume it, you inhale it, you eat. Probably you can be also exposed on your skin, although this is a minor exposure pathway. And then you determine the dose to man by consumption, by ingestion, by inhalation. What you are meaning now is how an animal, as I understand, how an animal data set refers to a human data set.
Exactly.
Can you directly compare this? And of course, you cannot compare a rat with a human. But there are studies who looked into this, and there are a couple of models how you can do this according to the weight. That's the most important factor. According to your muscle mass, according to, for example, cows, they have several stomachs compared to a monogastric animal. So there are means how you can translate results obtained in an animal to a human. And then, of course, if it is possible, it's always good to have a real measurement with a human. That's ethically needs to be, of course, is critical. And I remember in the very, very old days, probably you had a lot of data from the Bikini Atoll inhabitants, where you could actually measure, and also from the bomb explosions where humans were involved. And so epidemiological studies you can then compare on the effect side to what would be the effect in the animal. So there are some means, but of course direct comparison is hard, and in the end you deduce values in order to see if this is valid also for humans.
Because if I understand it well, and what I remember from school is that normally you calculate the absorption in different organs, different organisms based on like compartments, right? So for example, we have a compartment of lungs, we have compartment of blood, and there is a transfer coefficient. So for example, if the lungs have different structure, or maybe, for example, digestive system has different length, the absorption will be different. So this is why it is impossible to translate it directly from a cow, for example, to a human. Okay.
Yeah,
great.
And then there exist all these models from ICRP, for example, to calculate the distribution in the different organs. You know, when you are calculating the dose, there are the quality factors, which indicate, dependent on the organ, on how an organ is working, on the mass of the organ, on the composition of the organ, and finally also on the radionuclide, because an alpha emitter behaves completely different once in the human body compared to a beta or a gamma emitter. So there is a lot of research being done in that, and specifically many models have been developed, and in general these models, they tend to overestimate the dose, to be on the secure side. And I think I haven't seen any other science where this radiation protection is so developed as in the nuclear area. If you compare to other fields in chemistry or pharmacy, I think the nuclear area is much more developed.
But then the question can be raised. If maybe this overestimation is somehow harmful for the nuclear field. For example, in terms of radio protection of the personnel, I hear also many scientists that are just annoyed with LNT theory. With your experience and so much research on so many samples, how do you approach this? How do you explain it to next person asking you about LNT?
When you think about this, you often, it's an interesting question, because people get suspicious when you are explaining in too much detail. So what can we do? We can only explain that we are trying to prevent any harm coming from nuclear. And the more you research, the better you are informed. Unfortunately, the more you know, the more you are worried. And it's just a human factor. And that's probably a crux of radiation protection, because this also, imagine we are dealing with tiny, tiny, tiny amounts. And there is a natural radioactivity people are not concerned about. There is exposures due to X-ray, to now CT, and all this is mammography. This all actually has an impact on your body. People are not concerned about this. They are even not interested about the dose they receive, which is much higher when you compare to an exposure which you experience during release of a radionuclide. And look at also the results of Fukushima and of the Chernobyl. People claim there were so and so many deaths. And there are several reports which clearly went into the factor how many people really died from radiation. And the problem is it's hard to distinguish what is direct radiation, what is direct exposure. And I've been many times specifically in the Chernobyl affected area. So you had some of the liquidators who had a certain dose, of course. But what happened afterwards, they were marginalized. What is the right word? So they were really kind of discriminated because they came from Chernobyl. They started to drink and they died from liver cirrhosis rather from radiation. Now, what is the effect? Is this radiation? In a way, it's radiation related, but it's not radiation as such. And I know specifically an old professor, he died recently, but in the high age of over 90, who had a dose which normally you would claim would be deadly. And during the Chernobyl accident, he lived happily and to high age. So it's, a lot of very emotional discussion. And it's the same like for smoking. My grandfather, he used to smoke until very high age, was very healthy. Others are smoking, they die early, they get lung cancer, and we know there is a direct relation between smoking and cancer, lung cancer. On the other side, there are individuals who are actually counter facts showing what is going on there. So it's a very emotional discussion, and you need to look into the details. What we try specifically in the Women in Nuclear Communication, that we explain the facts, what is really true, and you always can interpret statistics to what you want to see in it. And this is also a problem. I remember in Germany once there was in the vicinity of a nuclear power plant, there was claimed that there is an increase in the leukemia rate in children. When you looked at the data, so and it's a small cohort, it's a very small population there. Instead of one child, you had two. So actually it's a high increase just from statistics. But if this is related to exposure or of radiation, for me, it's not guaranteed. So there needs to be many more studies who look into this, and we try to be neutral, to take serious the concerns of the population. And often when explaining, people better understand. The criticism comes often from everything is obscure, it's not to be seen, and actually is also in the press, it's presented in a very negative way. Some politicians present it in a negative way. Some movements like the Green Party or the Greenpeace are having negative perception of it. Now, this might change now with climate change and green energy, because we all knew that and know that nuclear is clean energy. And I was 1.5 years ago, I was at the CEM, Clean Energy Ministerial, where for the first time nuclear was discussed as an option in an energy mix, not as the sole solution, but in an energy mix. Because on one side, we don't want to give up all the luxury we have and all the benefits of nuclear and energy provisions. On the other side, there needs to be a sustainable energy provision, and then you have the fears for nuclear. So I think maybe in the future this will, and I hope it will change, that nuclear power is part of the solution, and you add it as needed. And there are new reactors and new types, which might be less risky than others of the old type nuclear reactors, and the small movable ones, which are highly appreciated in certain areas. So because you can put it where you need it.
Almost like a battery, exactly.
Yeah, so it's actually a fantastic solution. And I think this probably will be the future.
Exactly. But for this, we need to start with proper education of the public so that they are also accepted as the solution for the clean electricity of the future.
Yeah, and what we need really is politicians who are fighting for that. And also we need the public press, because if the public press is talking negatively about nuclear, then the mind of the population and how it's the perception will not that change, because people, they don't read sophisticated scientific journals where everything is clear. They read what's in the public press, and therefore I think this is something what specifically the scientists maybe have ignored for too long, to speak with the public, to speak with the press in understandable terms. And if you are not able to do that, you need a translator to do that, that the message is coming across.
Yeah, great. I totally agree with you. I am very curious about radioecology still. What are the trends in right now, 2020? What do radioecologists work on?
So there is still Fukushima, where you are looking how radionuclides behave in the long term. You have still the example of the Chernobyl accident and lessons learned from there. So what has been developed more and more to use modern tools such as geographical information systems to combine this with ecological models and radioecological models, that you can define where your critical area is. So actually it's the production of critical maps for if an accident happens, or for preparation in case of an accident would occur. So emergency preparation, where that you can better direct your countermeasures or your actions to places where there is a high population, where there is a critical ecosystem, where you have a high transfer. So this is already going on since a couple of years. What is also interesting specifically in radioecology is waste management, because how will the waste behave once it's deposited, either in a deep depository or above? Is there any impact? For example, climate change might impact the composition of your final deposit as well. Is there a chance that the radionuclides would escape from there? How would they behave? Would they enter the food chain? Would they enter the water pathways? So this is something which is still very interesting. The sea, the marine environment is still a major sink also. How does it behave? And Fukushima actually is addressing this partly, because some of the radioactivity escaped to the sea and how it is circulating there. What is also interesting is, in my opinion, is the self-healing potential of nature. And I always take the example of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, where when I came there was shortly after the accident. That was a highly populated area, of Pripyat, the city, and now to observe how the environment is changing when the human impact is reduced. And only after a few years you could see animal species returning who have been practically lost from this environment. And this is something I think which is really highly interesting to see how that actually is impacted if you have long-term radiation, and if you have also low radiation. And for me, some of the interesting questions is still also, which has never been answered to 100%, is a hormesis effect. And I'm a geneticist originally, as I told you. And if you put pressure on an organism, be it an antibiotics or something, the organism reacts. And what does it do? It
Mutation.
protects itself. So actually it becomes more vivid or more survives more than others who don't have that. And I have not yet seen real proof of the hormesis effect, which from my biological knowledge would be actually something which exists. And I would be really interested in seeing more research in that area, in the radioecology
But
area.
Is it possible to actually prove hormesis? There is a lot of discussion about how difficult is making a study on such a huge scale with an effect that is stochastic.
Now, what you need is a very low radiation area where you can study, because we are talking about really very, very low doses, where you normally you hardly can measure. So many years ago, we had the idea to do studies in one of these deposits deep down under 300 meters with bacteria as a first means to start, to see if there is can be the survival rate or whatever you can check on different traits. And this is a possibility. You need to reduce the natural radioactivity as well in order to be able to see an effect. So, and that's probably one of the reasons why it has never, minimum to my knowledge, maybe I'm not up to date there, but I haven't seen a real proof of it, which would be logical for me as a biologist.
So we would need to eliminate all the background radiation to be sure that there is no other factors that are influencing the development of the situation.
Absolutely, yeah, that's
and
exactly.
This is almost impossible to do on the surface of the Earth when we are walking next to the sources of radiation almost all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. You have natural radiation all over, from the sun, from the underlying geology. So, yeah, sure. And I have a very nice sticker. I am radioactive with potassium 40.
Me probably too. I just ate a banana before the interview, so
yes.
I'm sure this is happening as well. I'm very interested in what you said before about you abolishing the position that you had in IAEA, the position of the director.
Yeah.
Do you think that the nuclear industry is ready for such drastic changes, or it was only possible in your own lab because you were the director and you could decide about yourself?
No, yeah, the agency is a very specific organization, and it's mostly known for the safeguards activities. That's how people perceive. They see, okay, the inspectors going to the facilities, taking samples, and actually it's the watchdog. The agency has another side, which is all these applications in not only nuclear energy, which is an important point, but also in the area of food and agriculture, health applications, as we talked before, which are also covered in the laboratories, and then nuclear security and safety. So you have these different departments. Now, nuclear industry, that's really something which is concentrated on nuclear energy production. And we have seen over the years a lot of trends there. We were in China with women in nuclear, where we saw recent developments, very impressive, how they, like a Lego system, build a reactor and export this also. Then in UAE, the build of the 4 units in Baraka, where we actually also had a Women in Nuclear annual conference. And as I said, for me, the trend really is in these small reactors, mobile reactors, because they are constructed in a way that they don't present a threat. There won't be an accident like had happened in Fukushima or in Chernobyl. It's smaller, it's mobile, it produces energy for local communities. The application for saltwater desalination, so where you also don't need huge reactors. So I think for me personally, this is more the trend, and there are now several prototypes. They need testing. They also, and what is needed now really is that there are clear guidances, which ones are to be used, and these regulatory issues which have to be addressed. But I think they are in Canada, what I have seen, they are really far ahead. There is something in France. So there are these things are happening. The nuclear industry as such, I think they also struggle, because in some areas, like in my home country, in Germany, the government has decided to turn down all the nuclear power plants. I don't know if this is convertible, and if it will take a long time to regain that knowledge, because knowledge is lost. Since the people are aging and there are no new generations coming. Therefore, I personally think also the role of the young nuclear generation is very important, where you keep knowledge, you transfer from the elder generation knowledge to the younger, and you keep them motivated. When I was still in Munich, I was lecturing at the university there, Radioecology, and I had about 20 students, because it was a very specialized course, which was fun, because you had a real good exchange with the students, and we could do some travels and trips, so I could bring them to some sites of my projects in Kazakhstan and so Russia, which of course is exciting for a student. But when I left there to transfer to the agency, I had 5 students left. And this is sad, because, they didn't see at this time a career possibility. And then slowly in some universities in Germany, I can here speak only for Germany, some faculties closed, all related to nuclear sciences. And nowadays there are few universities where you can at all lecture and learn about nuclear applications, which I personally think is sad. In other countries, like in UAE, they get the experts from outside. They train their own staff in order to build up now this competence in their state, and I think this is great. So maybe this will have to come also in the future, will be more pronounced. And I hope this is coming before the old timers are dying out.
Yes, we are taking care of it in nuclear societies with the young generation networks, and I can assure you that we have very strong group in Germany, very great, very good people around there. So no worries, we're working on this.
That's
but
good.
let's jump to women in nuclear, because this is a very, very exciting part of your career and well, your hobby, your after work probably. And I'm interested in what is the added value of having gender diversity in specifically nuclear industry or any technical industry?
I personally think when you have a mixed team, it's the best. It shouldn't be more from this or that side. The best is a good 50-50 mix. In the past, the nuclear industry or nuclear sciences was male dominated, and there were very, very few women. And often these women, they were rather the ones doing the work in the laboratory, and then the men going to the conferences and so on. This is now slowly changing. And we know from industry, every great industry benefits if they have a good diversity mix. And so you immediately see that the atmosphere is friendlier in the institution, that it's more kind of efficient. It's a healthy competition. Because competition is good, yeah. You need competition. It shouldn't only not be nasty, but so women add really something. And I have to say, really the best employees I ever had were women after they had kids, when they re-entered into the job. These were the best because they were efficient. When they were there, they were working and they completed on time, excellent results. They know how to organize.
And I guess they have these crucial qualities of emergency management, patience, multitasking, that you learn when having family, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a match, yeah. You need the male components and you need the female components, and together they are actually performing to the best. And for every institutions, it is really good to have a mix of their stuff. So the diversity mix, like the energy mix, you consider all options, yeah. So also there you consider all options. You need the young ones, you need the experienced ones, you need men, you need women, no discrimination about sex, gender, religion, whatever. And actually it really pays off, because you are more successful if you are doing this. Your results will be better.
Where is gender inequality the biggest problem? In which level of the company? Is it the newcomers? Is it the managerial level or the directors?
No, it's still in the higher categories, in the decision-making bodies. It's slowly changing, but it still will take time until you have balanced one by one men and women. Look at the agency. When I came, there was no female deputy director general. Then after many years, we had one. Now there are actually two. So from 6, 2 are women. So, and slowly it changes, but you need to have the women on the higher categories. Now, often women, they don't reach this level because, first of all, they are often too decent and do the work, but don't foster their career because they are too shy and too modest to do that. And then they have a family, and family competes to a certain extent with your job. You need to have a partner who goes along with you that way. Now, I was privileged because my husband was a houseman. So I was free to travel, and he took care of the children and the household and shopping and all this stuff. Not every woman has that privilege, but if you have more shared responsibilities, then also career for women is possible, but it's still very much the traditional way, that the man makes the career, the husband makes the career, and once you have family, the wife stays home. And we had, for example, in my former institute, we had a huge program that women who had a family, had children, that they could re-enter their career. But they are lacking a very important time during the career path. And this is exactly the time after university, after the first job, when you actually climb the ladder, and they are lacking this. And so they start early and then they never reach the top. And I think this is something which needs to be addressed to cover that period, how to keep them also motivated, because then some say, oh, I have no chance and I will not succeed because I'm now out for 5 or 10 years. How should I come back? So you need to keep them involved in a way that they are not losing out. And I think that's really important. And and then, well, we all have to work now according to German law minimum until the same age like men and women. And in the end, it should be possible to have women in leading positions and in decision making. And then you will see also that decisions will have that other touch as well, the female touch.
So you talked about personal reasons, some features of character of women that may influence their career choices. Practical reasons, family, no time, the gap in their career. Were you able, your Women in Nuclear, able to identify any problems that lie in the system? That, for example, I don't know, recruitment process is not well suited for women, or somehow they are discriminated when climbing the ladder?
Yeah, what we do in Women in Nuclear, we are having a mentoring program where we link women with other women who are making a career in order to, it's not coaching, it's really mentoring to somehow allow them access. Women in Nuclear, we are working also with a professional recruitment company that if there is an interesting position, I share it with the membership, are interested, and now there is a trend to employ more women. So actually it's really a good time for women to apply for positions. And but it's very much related to the individual institution. We can only make them aware. We can only, and I'm hopefully close to conclude an agreement with the IAEA, where we are also helping or want to support the recruitment minimum to have access to competent women who would normally not apply for agency position. And so this is how we can help mentoring in the recruitment process, also preparing the women for an interview. And I often use this example when I was director and you interviewed for a position and you asked the man, do you have experience in gamma spectroscopy? He would say, of course, I did it during my university study. The woman has exactly the same experience. She would say, oh yes, I did during my university studies. That's 5 years ago. So you see already how you come across, how you word your sentences, and there a little help and support can help how to write your personal history form, how you write your CV, and this is something where Women in Nuclear can help.
Any other projects that you think are exciting in Women in Nuclear that maybe you worked on or see being developed right now?
Nuja, what we are trying to do is now to have more partnership agreements where we provide then opportunities for women. At this stage, we were a network where the women could work together, but we want to improve our website, which is under construction now. I want to have a who is who there. When you are looking, for example, for somebody, you click and you get immediately the names of those who are experts in this field. If you have a question, if there is an interesting job, so that you could approach and support these women then during their career way. So the website is a major issue. More partnership agreements, as I mentioned, with the IAEA, with NEA, for example, we are trying now. We have with professional recruiters in the nuclear area, so to provide opportunities for women and to support women.
Great. So maybe last question on women in nuclear would be, how does everyday life of a director of the Women in Nuclear Global look like? What are your tasks? What are the perks? What is, difficult? Maybe you are doing something that you really love, some part of this job.
Well, as you know, this is volunteer work, which I do aside. I still have my little consultancy, but I have to say, in average, I work almost every day a couple of hours for women in nuclear. There is always something which is of interest. At the moment, we are founding 2 new chapters, regional chapters in Africa, WIN Africa, with support by the IAEA, I should mention. Also a regional chapter in Latin America. So I have day-to-day interaction with winners via Zoom, via other means, emails. We continuously have new members coming who need guidance, new chapters. We had 2 new chapters recently, one in Tunisia and one in Ukraine. And so they want to know, what do I need to consider when I want to create a chapter? Then we are planning now the annual conference, which unfortunately we had to shift from this year to next year due to COVID, because we cannot be sure that everybody can travel. So the preparation of the scientific program, individuals approach me. Sometimes it's also not so nice. So these are the negatives where you sometimes think, oh my God. Nevertheless, but in the end, it's very inspiring, and I think it's really, I hope that minimum some women could benefit from my connections. I act as mentor, not only in women in nuclear, but also in a professional women's network, where I try also to bring this together, because that opens new perspectives. So I think I'm pretty busy with women in nuclear. And I have now served almost 4 years, which means 2 terms. I hand over end of this year to my successor, who is a French lady, and she will take it on further. We are working on the website to make it better, to make it more attractive, to make it professional. So there are loads of ideas which need to be translated in something tangible. And for this, we need also active women, because it's still an NGO, volunteer-based, where we have to relate on women to help us implementing everything. And I would say it was more work than I expected it to be.
But it's always that way when a person with thousands of ideas comes to the work. Only the sky is the limit.
Only the sky is the limit, and there's a lot expected from the membership. Yeah, so of course they want to have benefit of the network.
Okay, as we slowly come to the end, maybe you could tell us something about your plans for the future, what you are excited about, your priorities in terms of your career.
Well, my career is close to the end. I'm not so young anymore.
But you're still doing many exciting things. So,
there are still
I want to hear about them.
Very exciting things, absolutely. You know that I'm running this little consultancy with my friend, and we have still a lot of plans, which is not only work related, but also related to leisure. So we both like traveling very much. Last year we were visiting Lake Baikal for several weeks with the Trans-Siberian Railway and by
With
car.
the detector of neutrinos right there, right?
Yeah, and so we have a plan to go to Kamchatka, which is a dream of mine. To also via, we don't know yet, but this is a plan we have in mind. We want to go to New Zealand, and sometimes it's connected to some work we are doing there, but always combined with also experience. The people there and how they live. And this is also the beauty of women in nuclear, because we have so many member states and members in member states that wherever you can go, you can call and say, oh, I'm coming. And it's great, because everywhere you have a friend there, and this is fantastic. So plans is a lot of travels. I will still do some work, and of course I will be further involved in Women in Nuclear as an advisor. We have an advisory committee of past presidents, and we are now in a handover phase, which is also exciting. And I will be still in Vienna and being the representative of WIN to the IAEA, where a lot of events is happening. So I think I won't be bored.
Great. Thank you very much for this very inspiring talk.
You're welcome.
And initiate at least a new approach to the many difficult problems that must be solved in both private and public conversation if the world is to shake off the inertia imposed by fear and is to make positive progress toward peace.